Picture the empty spot on the floor right next to Caitlin Clark, the one every roster in this league would give an arm to fill. A shooter who stretches the floor so wide she finally has somewhere to fire the ball. The Fever had that player. They drafted her on purpose. And this week they let her walk out the door, pull on a defending champion's jersey, and leave for nothing. Not traded, not lost in a bidding war they couldn't afford. Handed over, because the Fever front office decided the paperwork was too much trouble. Here's the part that should stop every Fever fan cold. The player they just gave away shot better than 42% from deep in her final college season. 42. In a league starving for shooting, on a team built around a passer who lives to find open looks, the Fever drafted a knockdown shooter, called her exactly that in the press release, and then let her leave without lifting a finger to keep her. And the person whose name is on that decision is Amber Cox. Cox is the Fever's chief operating officer and general manager. Roster moves, asset calls, who stays and who goes. That's her desk. She's held the title since October of 2024. So when the defending champion Las Vegas Aces came knocking with an offer sheet for a young Fever shooter named Justine Pissott, the clock that started ticking was Cox's clock to beat. And she let it run out. Let me walk you through how fast this actually happened, because the speed is the tell. On Tuesday, the Aces tendered an offer sheet to Pissott, a developmental player the Fever had just drafted this spring. Under the rules, Indiana had about a day, roughly 24 hours, to match it and keep their own player. That's the whole window. One day to say, she's ours, we're keeping her. And here's how badly Vegas wanted her. Within about 5 hours of putting that offer on the table, the Aces waived a guard, Chennedy Carter, just to clear the roster spot she'd need. The champions moved in hours. The Fever sat on their hands for the full day and let the deadline pass. By the end of it, Pissott had signed a rest-of-season contract with Las Vegas. Think about the difference in urgency there. One team cleared a veteran off their books before the afternoon was out to make room. The other couldn't be bothered to make a single phone call count. So why didn't the Fever match? This is where it stops being a basketball problem and starts being something harder to stomach. The explanation came from head coach Stephanie White, and I want to be precise here, because the words matter. White said the team kept veteran center Damiris Dantas and rookie forward Grace Van Slooten because they're, and this is the quote, great culture players, great culture teammates who will continue to elevate and build and pour into our culture. She described Dantas as a veteran who understands how to stay ready so she doesn't have to get ready. And on the decision not to open a roster spot for Pissott, she said it was just not really the feeling that we had the ability to open up the roster spot. Read that last line again. Not that they couldn't. Not that the math was impossible. It just wasn't the feeling that they had the ability. A 24-hour window to keep a shooter you drafted for shooting, and the reason you let her go is a feeling about roster spots. The word she reached for twice was culture. And that's the mask slipping, because nobody who watched this decision believes the problem was a shortage of good teammates. The Fever made no cuts. They kept everyone they wanted to keep. What they didn't do was find room for the one player who fit the future. Now, let me tell you exactly who they let walk, so you understand the size of it. Justine Pissott is a 6'4" forward. Some outlets list her at 6'3", who projects as a stretch 4, the kind of tall shooter who drags a defense out of the paint and hands a guard like Clark acres of space to work. The Fever took her 25th overall in the second round of the 2026 draft back in April, out of Vanderbilt, after a stop at Tennessee. She was the first Vanderbilt player drafted in more than a decade, and the reason they wanted her was not a secret. The Fever's own announcement, in their own words, was titled, "Fever adds shooting in drafting Pissott." Add shooting. That was the plan they put in writing. In her final college season, she averaged 11 points, 4.5 rebounds, and a couple of assists a game across 34 games, and she did it while burning better than 42% from 3 on nearly 7 attempts a night. That's not a project. That's a ready-made floor spacer, the exact profile analysts had been circling for months as the kind of shooter who'd fit next to Clark like a glove. One outlet even ran the phrase out loud, Caitlin Clark's potential perfect teammate. Now, that's opinion, not gospel. But it's a defensible read, and it's the read the Fever themselves shared on draft night when they told everyone why they took her. So the irony writes itself. Drafted to add shooting, handed to the champions, for nothing back. And think about what that fit was supposed to unlock. Clark is a passer first, a player who makes her money finding teammates in the split second a defense collapses on her. Drop a 6'4" shooter into the corner, and you punish every defense that dares to help offer. And Clark's passes turn into the easiest points on the floor. That's the whole theory a stretch four is built to serve. It's the reason analysts had penciled Pissott in as a natural fit next to Clark before she'd played a single professional minute. You don't have to buy the perfect teammate label to see the logic. A tall, willing shooter is the single most quoted item on the wish list of anyone building around a passer. The Fever didn't just draft a player, they drafted a solution to their own biggest problem. And then they let the solution sign somewhere else. And this wasn't a throwaway pick they stumbled into. Pissott arrived at Vanderbilt by way of Tennessee, rebuilt her game, and turned herself into the first Commodore taken in a WNBA draft in more than a decade. The Fever spent a real selection on her, a second-round bet, 25th overall, that a developing wing could grow into the shooter they'd been missing. And second-rounders who can actually shoot at that clip are exactly how smart teams find value without paying a fortune for it. The scouting worked, the projection worked, and the only thing that failed was the part where the front office had to decide she was worth the trouble of keeping. What keeps gnawing at me about this front office is that it isn't one bad afternoon. Amber Cox runs basketball operations, and above her sits Kelly Krauskopf, the team's president of business and basketball operations. This is the group the Fever rebuilt their entire front office around back in 2024. Krauskopf stepped in that August, Cox arrived that October, both brought in specifically to modernize how this franchise makes decisions in exactly the Caitlin Clark era. That's the whole point of hiring people like this, to get the big roster calls right when the stakes are highest. And between them, the pattern keeps repeating. The Fever keep finding reasons not to put the right pieces around the best young talent this league has seen in a generation. They drafted the fit. They named the need out loud. And when a rival forced the question, they blinked. You can defend a lot of front office moves. You can't defend blinking on a shooter you handpicked when keeping her cost you a roster decision you simply didn't feel like making. And look hard at what they chose to protect instead. A veteran center and a rookie forward, useful players, nobody's arguing otherwise. But here's the thing the culture answer skips right past. The Fever never had to choose between those two and Pissott by cutting anybody. They chose not to make room at all. Faced with a shooter who fit their franchise player like a missing puzzle piece and a deadline of a single day, the safest possible move was to do nothing, keep the group comfortable, and let the hard call make itself. Comfort won, the future lost. And the bill for that comes due every night Clark drives into a crowded lane with nobody spacing the floor for her. And here's the part that turns the knife. The team that valued her is the team that just won it all. The Las Vegas Aces don't do sentiment. Becky Hammon's group doesn't clear a roster spot in an afternoon for a player they think is filler. Champions move that fast for one reason. They saw something the Fever drafted, named, and then shrugged off. So now the team that discarded a shooter gets to watch the defending champions add her on purpose in a matter of hours. What Indiana called a feeling about roster spots, Vegas called an opportunity, and they took it before the Fever finished thinking about it. If this all sounds familiar, it should, because we've watched a version of it before, in a different sport, a different city, with a front office that never lived it down. Go back to 2012. A young guard nobody saw coming had just lit up New York and turned a season into a phenomenon. Better than 14 points and 6 assists a night at his peak, a whole city wearing his jersey. Then another team put an offer sheet in front of him. The New York Knicks had the right to match it and keep the player their own fans adored. They decided the deal was too rich, too complicated, not worth the trouble. They declined to match. He walked. And for years afterward, the fans didn't remember the reasons. They remembered the names of the people who let him go. That's the trap the Fever just stepped into. It isn't exactly the same mechanism, and I won't pretend the fine print lines up. But the shape is identical. Your own player, a rival's offer, a window to keep them, and a front office that decided the effort wasn't worth it. So here's what I keep coming back to. Caitlin Clark is the best thing to happen to this franchise in 20 years, and the one job that matters more than any other is putting the right people around her while her prime is sitting right in front of them. Remember, she just came back this week from a back injury on a strict minutes limit, the exact stretch of her career when a floor-spacing shooter beside her matters most. This week, the Fever had that shooter. A shooter they drafted for exactly this, a rival begging to take her, and a single day to say no. They said nothing. They let the clock run out and called it a feeling. Was this a front office that couldn't keep her, or one that just didn't want to badly enough? Tell me how you see it down in the comments, because Amber Cox and the people upstairs clearly aren't losing sleep over it. I'd like to know if you are.